Again, this is Ray Mofield taping for the State Archives in Frankfort and for the Marshall County Library and for the Pogue Library of Oral History at Murray State University. We're visiting in the home today of Carl Lovett. I guess we could say this is sort of the Olive neighborhood. It's good to see you, Mr. Lovett. I will start off usually by asking the person's age.
83. Born in 1900.
I believe you qualify as a senior citizen. People are trying to read. So would you mind telling us a little bit about your ancestry, your father and mother? We'll start there.
Well, my mother's people, she was a Henson. I've gotten this information within the past year. Came from the Netherlands, and from there they went to Germany, from Germany to England. Now that was over a period of several hundred years, and then they came to America in the early 1800s, I would say. And located, the first one whose first name I know was Bartlett Henson. He and his brother, William O. Henson, settled in Marshall County, not far from Faraday. And Bartlett Henson had several children, but one of them was named Philip. Philip married a Johnson, Mary Johnson, better known as Pop Johnson. In fact, the two were known as Uncle Phil and Aunt Pop. And he had several children, including a Dr. Elias Henson, who located and spent his life practicing near Faraday. He had one son whose name was Newton Molman Henson. He was my grandfather. Now, and my mother's name was Huldah Jane Henson, who married Hugh F. Lovett. Now, as to the Lovett family...
Were you related in any way to the famous Judge Lovett, Henry Lovett?
Well, he was my uncle, Henry H. Lovett, yes. And the Lovett family, now I have a history of their family, which was started by my grandfather's uncle, whose name was Daniel Lovett. He kept a record, a real good record, and he must have been a good scribe, one of those old-fashioned, real penmanship-like people, you know. You don't see much of it now.
You don't see it in my handwriting.
No, nor mine. But this man said that the first Lovett who came to this country came from Portugal. He was English, and he came to Portugal from England at a time possibly when England had a law to prohibit her citizens from coming to the new country. So this man fought in the Revolutionary War, and for years I didn't know his first name, but recently I have obtained a photostatic copy of an application he made for a Revolutionary War pension. And in that, he gave his wife's name and his children's names and their birth. One of those children was named Moses. Now, my record shows a Moses Lovett and gave his birth date, which is exactly the same as that on this photostatic copy I have.
Well, isn't that wonderful?
And I came into possession of this.
Detective story.
Almost by accident.
Well, that's certainly wonderful. You go ahead and finish what you were
Well,
beginning.
I have a record of, and now Moses Lovett had a son named I
John.
believe his name was John.
Right.
And then John Lovett had several children, including my grandfather, George Newton Lovett. And then George Newton Lovett had two sons, Hugh F. Lovett, my father, and Henry H., or Judge Lovett, you just mentioned.
Yeah, Henry Hardin Sr. I knew
that's
him
right.
well, of course.
That's right. And he also had a daughter named Goldie. She married Lee Henson and was widowed at an early age, left with 6 children that she raised. And then her one of her daughters had 5 or 6 children, and she was widowed at an early age, and then that left all these children for my Aunt Gaudie Hanson to take care of. And she raised all of them and sent them through high school and some of them to college. One of them at least made a preacher. I know some of them went to college. And she did all this without any government aid. And she didn't complain, and her faith in the Lord increased instead of decreased. Twice during her lifetime, she lost her house by fire. And it was wonderful that she...
They worked hard and made do.
That's true, and died at about 91 or 2.
Well, hard work didn't kill her, did it?
No, it didn't. It sure did.
Well, sometimes we act as though we think it would. Well, that's a beautiful history, Mr. Lovett. Could you tell us about your early schooling? Did you go to a one-room school?
Yes, I went to a one-room school, and somehow I missed the bus. Had to walk every day. We crossed 2 creeks, which when it would come a rain would overflow, and we had no footlog or bridge, and it was a little bit dangerous in a way.
What was the name of this school?
Salem School. Salem School was built within, I would say, 300 or 400 yards before my great-great-grandfather, Bartlett Henson, settled. And his son then, Philip G. Henson, my great-grandfather, lived in it. And I have been in the house several times myself. In fact, it was just torn down a few years ago by Leonard Miller, who now owns that property. It was about 1.5 miles at least from here to where I went to school, a one-room school.
Do you remember anything about any of the teachers?
Well, the people, the teacher who taught most there when I was going to school was Miss Ethel Washburn, who married Dr. Sam Henson. And
I remember that name. Wasn't he county physician?
Yes, that's right.
Well, that's real great. What subject did you like most in school?
Probably math.
Mathematics. That's the one I always liked the least. But you should have made an engineer.
I should have made something. I don't know what. Sure.
Been very successful in my book.
Yes. Anything else you remember particularly about school? The games you played, maybe?
Yes, we played baseball, and we played Wolf Over the River, and base. We call it king base.
Mm-hmm.
We had a good time and during
Could
playtime.
you tell us how you played king base? Do you remember that?
Yes. Each person would select a tree or a rock or something all within a radius of probably 100 feet. And then we would do what we would call stir. That is, we would get out away from our base, and if anyone could contact us, touch us, that is, then we had to be under their leadership, and we would be a part of their base, and this would continue until usually someone would get the entire group
Yes, sir.
to his base.
All right, you grew up and became a young man, and could you tell us anything about how you entertained yourself, what young folks did, or courting customs maybe?
Well, we had play parties.
What was a play party?
A play party. Well, in one sense, it was similar to a dance, but
Square dance, I
yeah,
suppose.
that's true. People would get together. Somebody would do what they call make up a party, and circulate the news around over the country, and usually be on Saturday night. Go to some house, and then each boy would select a partner, and then they would sing some song, and then they would, I don't know exactly what to call it, but they'd sort of dance or play and go around in a circle usually, so because
Buffalo Gals?
pardon?
Buffalo Gals, was that one of the songs they'd sing?
I'm not familiar with it.
But he does know some of them.
A lot of old fiddle tunes. Sometimes I guess they'd have a fiddle play. 8th of January, Leather Breeches, Bile Them Cabbage Down, Cripple Creek, Soldier's Joy. You recognize any of those?
Well, Soldier's Joy used to be played at when they'd have a square dance thing. One of the play party songs was Old Joe Clark, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Old Joe Clark's dead and gone. Hope he's doing well.
And Old Ann Tucker.
I guess so, yeah.
Very good. Now, what about going to church? Did you do much of that in those days?
Yes, just about every Sunday we would go. And,
How often did you have preaching?
Well, most of churches then had preaching every fourth Sunday, at least
Once a month,
time,
anyway.
Once a month, yes. And there were 4 or 5 different ways to go to church. You could walk, you could run, you could ride a horse, or you go in a buggy, or you go in a wagon.
Large families generally went in wagons.
That's true. In fact, I carried my family to church in a wagon for years and years.
I've heard my father say that they would go around. Various churches had services once a month, at least had preaching once a month, and they'd go 1 week to the Baptist church and 1 week to the Methodist church. And did you do anything like that?
Yes. Well, we usually went to church at Olive, and there were 2 churches there, Baptist and Methodist. And at one time, each of them had Sunday school. Baptist church had Sunday school at 9 o'clock, and the Methodist at 10 o'clock. And then there was preaching at each church once a month, and those were different days. In fact, I have been told that years ago, these 2 churches at Olive used the same building for a long time. One of them had the privilege of using the building first and fourth Sunday, and the other the second and the third. And they didn't conflict that way. And then after each of them had a building of their own, then for years they still respected this, and this
Scheduled preaching where they didn't have a conflict.
That's right.
Well, very good. I've heard my dad say that sometimes things were a little rough, that some of the boys would I believe I heard him tell once about a fellow that got mad at another one and cut the traces on his buggy harness nearly in two.
Mhm.
And when he went down a hill, then the buggy ran over the horse, and the horse ran away. And I've also heard him tell that he had been to preaching at Olive when some fella came up and shot a pistol through the window. Did you ever hear of anything like that?
Well, no, but I've heard of something just about as bad, that they used to have a tent meeting once in a while around Olive. And one night, I don't remember this, but I've just heard tell of it.
Mhm.
One night, the boys made up to do some dirt, and these tents had ropes tied to stakes to hold a tent together, you know. So these boys got around, one at each of these ropes, and at a certain signal, everybody had his knife ready, and they cut these ropes, the tent collapsed.
Oh, that wasn't very nice either,
No,
was
it wasn't.
All right, we've found out some of the entertainment and religious things you did. You got married. Tell us about your courtship and marriage, and whom did you marry?
Well, I used to have a horse. I called him Dud. He wasn't too young, but he had quite a bit of experience himself, and because he had carried two other couples to the marriage altar. And I had a new buggy. I bought a brand new, and I was proud of that.
Did you realize how dangerous it was to drive that horse? If he'd carried several to the altar, you...
Well, maybe that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, okay. Good. That's a very interesting story.
Tell us some more about your courtship.
Well, my wife and I were engaged for 1 year, like in a week, before we married. And we married at her parents' home.
Now, who were they?
Oscar T. Johnson, who married Orpha Henderson. And it was a private wedding, I would guess you'd call it. Just a few friends were there. And that old house is still standing after 62 years. We've been married 62 years.
That's wonderful. Well, you married and you had children. How many did you have?
Had 3 children. Helen Blanche Hogenkamp, Ruth Catherine Hillman, and Earl Lovett.
I knew the 2 girls, I might as well admit. I went to Hardin High School with them, some at least. Helen was not older than I, but she is smarter. She graduated earlier. I was retarded, so I got out in a year after she did, I believe it was.
Well, I'm still that way.
Where's Catherine?
Catherine is living in Jeffersonville, Indiana.
And Helen lives in Murray, the Hogenkamps. I know them well, of course.
And Earl,
What about the boy?
he lives here close to us.
Nearby, so that's
And,
he can help Mother and Dad a little bit.
Right.
All right. I heard my father once say, Mr. Lovett, that he went to a golden wedding anniversary celebration, and I believe it may have been at some of your wife's people. And the only thing that I recall about it, and stuck in my mind over the years, that they said something about the goose hangs high.
Oh, that was Grandpa Henderson's golden
Well,
wedding.
Now we're hearing right now from Mrs. Lovett. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that
Well,
day
I
that?
really can't remember it. I was about 8 years old, I think. But I remember the goose hanging high, and it made such a quacking noise they had to take him down.
That was a symbol of high living in those days. It meant that you had plenty of food. Did they really have plenty of food
Well, I
that day?
never knew it to be like, we always had lots of food. We had plenty at dinner, too. Everybody took dinner, and we really had a big dinner that day, in addition to what the children took, well, they had lots of dinner.
Didn't you say they killed one of several different animals?
Oh, yes, they killed 2 or 3 hogs and cows. And had lots of food, you know.
And without radio and television and all the entertainments we have now, you had plenty of visitors, apparently.
That's right. Had lots of conversation going on.
Yeah.
I believe we had just as good a time as the people do today.
Well, of course you did. People become sated with all the media that's around them now, and they become more tired than you did.
My wife and I were both raised on small family farms, and we were poor folks, but we never went hungry and we never went cold, and we had a good time.
Tell us about farming when you began. Did you plow mules or horses?
The first year I plowed, made a regular hand, I plowed a team of old mules that we'd had for years. And my dad bought a yoke of oxen that spring from a neighbor, and he plowed the oxen and I plowed the mules. Now, oxen are supposed to walk much slower than mules, but in turning at least, these old mules would take their time, and I seldom ever gained around on Dad. There's something funny happened about these oxen I'd like to tell you. My uncle, Henry H. Lovett, was making a crop this particular year just across the fence, I'd say, from where we were. And he came over about 10:30 or 11 o'clock to get a jug of water. We had a well there in the bottom on Clark's River. And he said to Dad, let me drive these oxen around. I guess maybe he never had plowed any oxen. So he went around, and when he got back to the starting point, the oxen decided it was time for dinner. And they went to the river and got him a drink of water, and he couldn't stop.
That is a very funny story. It's great. Knowing Judge Lovett, I'm
My dad was one of the first men in the country who owned a cultivator. That is, we'd plow corn and ride. Previously, we had the...
Was it a disc cultivator?
A disc cultivator. Mm-hmm. Previous to that, we used double shovels all the time. But he was a good farmer for his age. He never bought corn, nearly always sold corn and hay.
Well, that certainly increased the speed of plowing because you had to make a complete round to plow one row of corn with a double shovel. Now, I've done that.
Right.
And on a cultivator, you plowed it at one fell swoop as you went through. So you did twice as much, really.
That's true. And now you plow 6 rows at a time. A lot of people do.
Did you ever have a rastus?
Yes. Yes, I owned one. They were a 3-prong job instead of 2 like a double shovel.
And they had a little fender on them, and you could really plow the garden well.
That's right.
What did you grow? The typical West Kentucky crops, I guess.
Corn, tobacco. Tobacco was their money crop altogether. And when my wife and I married, we thought that we needed to farm just like our parents had. And we did that for years and years. And at times, it was almost living from hand to mouth.
Yeah.
We raised our children during the Depression days. They got their high school education during the Depression, and the oldest one was nearly through college before the Depression broke up in 1941. And how we did it, I do not know.
She did very well. I remember she was valedictorian at Hardin High School.
Well,
Well, they
that
both were valedictorian.
spoke well for her, of course.
Not the same time, but
Yeah.
Dad, tell them about the shoes you wore during the Depression.
I don't know if I'll tell this
That's
to
all
my
he'll understand, I guess.
but I'll tell this so I don't mind it. I don't mind telling jokes. I mean, I don't mind for a joke to be on me if I can be the one that tells it.
Yeah. Okay.
So, during the Depression, we would buy old sugar sacks from grocery stores that had 100 pounds of sugar in it. And my wife would make shirts for me out of them. And at one time, I bought a pair of shoes, and I should say a couple of shoes. They were not mates, but they were good shoes. Both of them were good shoes. And after wearing them a month or so, the odd one got to where it would pretty well fit my foot, and everybody didn't see this. But one time, this was the day after Halloween night. I carried my children to school like I did a lot of times up at Olive, which is 2.5 miles from home. And I had on those two shoes. It was customary for the boys to upset the toilets at school. This
On
was
Halloween or just regularly?
On Halloween.
Mhm.
It happened regular on Halloween. So when I got up there, well, that thing had happened. And the teacher asked me if I would mind helping set them back up. Of course, I didn't mind it. During the time we were doing that, one of the boys happened to notice my shoes, and he looked just straight down at them, and I knew that he knew they were not mates. But we lived through it.
Yeah. You know, one thing, you were showing me some written materials here. I was much impressed by the Hensons, who came out of Germany in about 500 A.D. and went to England between 1000 and 1100 A.D. But I want to get in a story about, did some of your ancestors kill a bear in Marshall County?
Yes, that happened. My Uncle Henry Lovett told me this story. He said that my great-grandfather, Philip Henson, who married Mary Johnson, they lived about 1.5 miles from where I lived, which was real close to the old Salem school where I went to grade school. And he said that at one time, Philip Johnson shot a bear. And there was a man living in that area, a neighbor to him, by the name of Washburn. And Washburn didn't like it because he had killed a bear. He claimed that was his bear. And incidentally, he took the horn from a deer he had killed, and he put that on a walking cane that he owned. And one of my cousins, who died 4 years ago, owned that walking cane.
Who was it?
I have seen the cane myself.
That was John Henson, wasn't it?
No, that was Prior Henson on the walking cane.
Could you tell us anything about, was Olive ever bigger than it is now? Or?
Well, at one time, I've been told this, Olive was a post office. And also, they sold beer there. I've been told that too. But that all happened before I remember.
Where did you trade on Saturdays most? Do you go to Benton or Hardin?
Well, Hardin used to be a thriving town. Had two general stores there, which did a good business. And my wife and I bought quite a bit of our housekeeping furniture at Hardin. A Mr. Hardin Cress was proprietor at one of these places. Pace's store was the other thriving place.
Mr. Lovett, you know, a half an hour just goes in a hurry.
Yeah.
Is there anything particular you'd like to say before we close up shop for today's
Well, I
program?
might say this. During the first 30 or 40 years of our married life, we had a pretty hard time. As I mentioned previously, it was in the Depression days. But somehow we got by, I don't know just how. Got the children through school, and we both had pretty good health. Through school, and we both had pretty good health, and now our health has slipped. Neither of us are any account, but I am grateful that when I had to work in order for our family to eat, that I had health so that I could.
In other words, you might say the Lord blessed you.
I know it did. I know that happened, yes.
Well, it's been a pleasure to me to visit in your home. Thank you for all the information that has now been preserved for interested historians and genealogists for forever, I suppose. And we'll see that this goes to the proper libraries. And, of course, WCBL Radio, which is paid for the taping. We remind everyone that these broadcasts are made possible by Shelby McCallum. I'm Ray Mofield, and we return you now to your announcer.